Okay, great. So, what are conservation districts? If you haven't heard of us, there are 14 of us in the state of Vermont. This map shows what our Windham County Conservation District. Um, we also do some agricultural work in the Ottaquechee Conservation District area as well. But what we do is connect people, organizations, and resources to steward the land and water. We do a lot of different things to reach our mission, which is to engage our community in good conservation practices. So what this means is we hold webinars like this, we do flyers, we go to different events that are educational, and then we also go on site visits and talk about financial options for people wanting to do conservation on the ground. And we are here to help people throughout Windham County, and even if you aren't, welcome to this. And we are a connection between state and federal government at a local level. We take a resource survey every year for what natural resources people are interested in or are concerned about. And wildlife is always a big one. So I'm excited to have this webinar specifically for that. So I'm going to stop sharing so that Courtney can share her screen.
Can
I'll
everyone
mention
see
also.
it?
Yep, I can see it. I'll also be monitoring the chat if people want to put questions there, and we will share them at the end.
Okay, perfect. So I can't see you guys while I'm sharing, but um, we can hold questions till the end. But just introduce myself. Courtney Buckley. I'm a fisheries biologist with the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department, based out of the Springfield office. So we have 5 different districts throughout the state, and we do things regionally. So I cover the southeastern part of the state, so overlapping with Windham County. A little background on what, as a fisheries biologist, we see it as like threefold, or there's three uh, legs to the stool. So the way that we manage fisheries is by managing people, habitats, and fish. So we do fisheries monitoring. We do electrofishing in our streams and our lakes and ponds. We use a bunch of different techniques. Um, Habitat restoration and management is a little bit more about what I'm going to talk about today, especially with the trees part of things. And I won't really touch on the people management other than, you know, having trees and having fish that are growing on trees has a lot to do with people and the way that we manage lands and stream banks. So we have 77 native fish species in Vermont, and 15 introduced. I want to highlight this because I will be talking mostly about trout, not to say that our lakes and ponds and the other fish that we find in our streams, like sculpins and dace that are often with trout, also benefit from trees, but we tend to focus a lot on trout in Vermont. Brook trout are our only native trout species. Both brown and rainbow trout were introduced in the late 1800s and have since become naturalized. They have wide distribution throughout the state, but rainbow trout are obviously like the most limited. Um, Brown trout are mostly in like our larger waters where things are slightly warmer. Brook trout are very temperature dependent. So they really like water between 55 and 65 degrees, which is often found at our higher elevations, steeper waters. Really follows that high elevation Green Mountain range. And then a lot of our headwater streams. We're often get people who will come with us out into the field and will be at a roadside ditch and they're like, there's no way there's trout in there. And we'll put our electrofishing equipment in and we'll pull brook trout pretty instantly. So they are everywhere, hence what the map is showing. I bring up water temperature because it is one of like the most limiting factors for where these fish can be. Just a quick comparison, brook trout, like I said, 55 to 65 degrees. Once water temperatures get to about 68, they start to experience thermal stress and they can't be in water that's over 72 for more than a few hours. Both brown trout and rainbow trout have a little bit more of a tolerance for warmer water. So they can be in waters up to 75 before experiencing that like thermal stress, but they can't be in water over 78 to 80 degrees for more than a few hours. So the best fish houses where fish are going to grow, often associated with trees. I think this photo is really good at showing like just how complex this type of habitat is. Cold, I've already covered the temperature. Like I said, 60, 65 is like really what we're aiming for. And connected. So connected means both water is able to get up and over its banks and fish are able to move upstream and downstream freely without any man-made impediments. So any sort of culvert, a perched culvert or a dam, especially in waters that are warmer, are gonna keep fish from getting upstream to where the habitat is better, especially during like high stress events. So when we talk about aquatic habitat, I think a lot of times we think of like what's just in the water, but it's also what the water temperature is, the conductivity, the amount of oxygen that's in the water. It's also the physical habitat. So what are the different substrate or rock sizes? Whether or not they can move, like I said, upstream, downstream, can they find different water depths? So having a really complex, I think these photos really highlight like different complex habitats. So you can see the shading from the trees on the larger photo with a gravel bar. It has some overhanging vegetation. We've got like a little bit of messiness with the down wood, and that's collecting more wood. And you have this side channel on the other side of the gravel bar, which is where you're going to find a lot of your smaller, younger fish. They can get out of the faster flow. They can get a little bit of what we call a velocity refuge. So they can rest over there, find shelter from any sort of predators that are trying to, you know, get something good to eat. And it also has like the deeper sections where the larger fish can spend time. So they're not competing for those different habitat like niches within that stream environment. The large wood that you see like in the top right, like is creating more of those deeper pools. So you have the shallower areas where the sediment is building up behind the wood. And that gives you that shallow area where you have the smaller bodied fish while having that deep hole. So good habitat is cold, connected, complex, and messy. So in addition to our fish grow on trees messaging, we also like to say wood is good and mess is best. And I think a lot of times people's, when they go out into nature, they see like a lot of mess, like in that bottom photo, and they think like, man, I really got to clean that up. I've got to help the fish and the environment. You know, they're not going to get able to get past that. We got to clean this up. And that's actually what fish are missing is that mess. And I'll get into that a little bit more. So, what we need for high quality life is shelter, right? Our houses that keeps us safe from the elements. Bring like that safety piece. We don't have a ton of like predators in our life now, but it keeps us safe and secure. We have abundant food nearby and readily available, and we're comfortable. So you're out in your backyard or on a hike, and you're in the direct sun. And I think we've all been there where it's gotten really, really hot and it can be very uncomfortable. It is the same for fish. I think on a really hot summer day, we all prefer to be under the shade of a tree or an umbrella in our backyard rather than really having the sun beat down on us. So trout are exactly the same. We typically say like what's good for people is good for fish, especially in our higher stress situations. A lot of people don't want to hear about what the fish got going on at those moments, but really like what is good for fish is good for the whole ecosystem and then beneficial to humans as well. So fish need that shelter. That's the places where they can hide out, where they can get a break from fast flows. They're ambush predators, so they typically sit behind large boulders in undercut banks or behind kind of these woody aggregates and wait for food to flow by, and they'll run out, grab the food, and go back to where they were resting. That's how a lot of the fish survived these bad floods that we've had, both historically, recently. That was a big question we got also, is what happens to these fish. They're finding those places where they can find shelter, find that safety, and kind of wait out the storm. So that also keeps them, those undercut banks, those large rocks, these large wood pieces, they are keeping both anglers and birds, other large fish, things that are eating fish, from being able to get them easily. I kind of touched on like they're being able to like grab the food, but the trees along the bank are not only falling in, but they're dropping their leaves. They're keeping the bad stuff like too much sediment and any other pollutants up on the land and not in the water. And all of that is benefiting those aquatic invertebrates and the little shredders that are taking all that organic material that is being put into the water from trees and breaking that down, helping the system overall, and then there for the fish to eat. What we saw also during these big flood events was that terrestrial invertebrates and bugs and things were getting washed into rivers, so the fish were eating really well. And most importantly is that temperature factor. A lot of our rivers are thermally impacted. A lot of our main stem rivers, we have roads directly along our rivers. The rivers have made the pathway. It's the path of least resistance. And it's only natural that we as humans have built our roads directly along those pathways. The issue being that now those rivers, that water is completely open to the sun's rays, solar radiation, and is warming. So having those trees, that vegetation directly along the stream, it really provides that cooling factor for waters. A little bit of background. We have a long history of agriculture and deforestation, logging practices in Vermont. It is part of our history, and also tells us a little bit more about what fish have been up against. And there's a good photo at the top here that shows an area that was artificially widened to allow logs to be floated downriver. And I think compared to the photos I showed earlier, there's really not that complexity in that area. You do have some of the large trees, but they're pretty young. We have some overhanging vegetation, but it's really kind of like flat through there. There's not a lot of like complexity in the depths, and there's not a lot of cover for fish in that area. So that upland and streamside trees being cut, you can see in the right photo, just kind of the roads and the railroad and agricultural fields really have done a number on our streams, which in turn impacts fish. So I think what we as a department have been doing, our natural resource conservation districts, different in conservation entities, DEC or other government agencies, we've really worked to rebrand woody, like called debris, right? So that kind of gives it a negative connotation to what these trees, both along the rivers. I feel like I'm going to focus a little bit on like trees in the river, but they come from streamside. They don't show up there out of a vacuum. We need to have stream side trees that are mature enough to age and fall in to the river to kind of create that complexity that we really have been historically stripped from. Really a push to rebrand this as woody material, woody structure, and really important fish habitat. And these are really great photos that show both how like they get really tangled up and like caught on other trees. Streamside trees actually hold that woody material in place. And in areas where you have a little bit more flow, they do tend to get pushed to the side, which also helps stabilize banks a bit. In 2012, the department, along with Trout Unlimited, began strategically adding wood to streams after many other studies to see like what is that limiting factor. It was in streams that had cold water that would support trout. The number one thing that was missing was in stream wood and that habitat piece. So it says 10 years. The 2012, we're coming up almost on 15 years. And we have many more than 50 miles of streams enhanced by adding large wood. This is an example of what we call chop and drop. So it's in areas where you already have pretty good riparian conditions. So you're not going to be cutting down like the only tree that is providing any shade. You definitely don't want to do that. But just adding to the complexity. So you can see the upstream area, the downstream area. This is going to create some pools and shallower areas and create that complexity that's going to really help trout out. And through that effort, they did studies before and after they did this just to see whether or not it was just bringing fish into that area or if it was increasing the trout population in the reach overall. So comparing areas downstream or upstream where wood was not added. And they did see that not only did it increase the number of fish and the size of the fish where wood was dropped, it was actually increasing the population throughout the entire stream reach as well. So they're saying they're estimating that increase is about like 2.4 times the biomass, which comes out to about 60,000 more brook trout. every year thanks to the efforts to add wood into streams. Um, this also goes into those habitat pieces, so the things that you wouldn't really necessarily think about with the fish growing on trees, but the benefit that these trees have in creating different types of habitats. So, what I said earlier, wood being wood is good, fish grow on trees. What's good for fish is good for people. It really helps to, during these big flood events, also capture sediments upstream, especially like where we're doing these are typically less than 20 feet wide sections, and helping those waters get up and over their banks during flood events, recharging groundwater, holding back some of that sediment and capturing other large wood and kind of holding that material higher in the stream, and keeping like severe flood impacts downstream a little bit more minimized. Um, this goes back to like the importance of trees along the stream. In the top right photo, you can see there's like park benches, or little, I guess, like bistro tables. So there's not a really great riparian area directly there, but you see how much work that these mature trees are doing to hold that stream bank together. Um, the complex root system is the best possible erosion control that we can have. Um, you can't really see it in these photos, but in areas where you have really great trees, and then you'll have a field or someone has cut all of the trees along that area, that's where a lot of that erosion and land loss is happening, which is putting a lot of sediment into the stream, which can also kind of smother good spawning habitat for trout. It can smother eggs that are getting aerated in the sediments, and definitely like changes the overall habitat downstream. Um, and those trees also help to capture this woody material or other like actual like debris gets caught there and doesn't continue to go downstream. So you can see just how high the water got in that bottom photo and how much material is being captured by those stream side trees. Um, when we talk about like, you talk about trees in the river, there's always the consideration of we don't want there to be any threat to infrastructure. Um, there for emergency services and all of the ways that people still need to be able to move around the landscape. Um, we definitely are not proposing that all wood be uh, left exactly where it is all the time. But there are lots of situations where it's not really necessary to remove that. And it is going to have a benefit to fish, to the river system overall. And that's in areas where there isn't any infrastructure downstream. There's no house or improved property that could be under threat. And a lot of times, like this left photo, you have this big curve. The trees are always going to get stuck on that outside bend and won't move very far if they do move at all. So the major issue there, I think, goes back to that bigger landscape photo of the road and the railroad and some of the older habitat or land uses. Was we've really kind of set ourselves up for failure in the way that we have been trying to uh, work over rivers instead of working with rivers. And it's not like the river's fault. It's the river is moving water, it's moving trees, it's moving sediment, it's moving fish, and it has been doing that. The issue is that we have a lot of undersized culverts or undersized bridges that cannot accommodate or were designed specifically to just move water, and sediments and woody material weren't taken into account when designing that. Um, and that is just the best information that they had at the time. But what we're doing now is working to upsize these uh, structures so that not only can they pass everything they need to pass, but ones that are perched where fish can't make the move upstream, that we're providing what we call AOP, or aquatic organism passage, which goes back to that good habitat is connected, especially in the face of climate change, where we're anticipating and what we're seeing is warming of those of some of these main stem rivers, is the tributaries, those headwaters where we do have cold, consistent uh, inputs, is we really need to make sure that fish can get to those areas when they need to. Um, so yeah, like as I was saying, cold, complex, connected is really what we're aiming for. And that is all like, how do we plan for the future? How do we anticipate, the impacts or the threats that these fish are going to get? And we always come back to trees. Uh, Trees being the best way that we can manage the fish, the people, and the habitat to benefit um, fish in our streams for the benefit of Vermonters, for generations, is not only in the stream, but along stream banks. So that's keeping trees that have fallen into the river, that are not going to impact infrastructure, letting them stay where they are, let them provide all the benefits that I highlighted earlier in the shelter, the putting organic material for the bugs and the critters, and uh, giving fish somewhere to find safety and security, um, while also finding areas where we can restore areas that have been impacted by past land use, and finding those priority areas where you can do tree plantings on a wide scale to help build where those future in-stream wood will come from. So it is kind of like a threefold strategy, in leaving things where they are now, dropping wood where we can to get those more immediate benefits, and planning way out for the future where we won't have to do those things because nature is doing it for us. Um, so with that, I really appreciate your guys' time and your interest in this topic, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. That was great. I feel like I often talk to landowners and explain some of the benefits, but you have much better wording for that.
Oh,
I love the mess is best and wood is good. Those are great. Um,
yes. Very succinct messages that come with a lot of that nuance.
I actually had a question on one of the last things you touched on, but folks, feel free to put stuff in the chat. Um, So you were talking about the planning for when you do these tree plantings. Is there certain species that you select for different reasons? Like I was thinking of, shorter lived species, but then fall into the river sooner, but they're not as large, so they don't provide as much organic matter. So I wasn't sure if what the considerations go on there.
Yeah, I think and something that like I always get like bothered by within our group and just the way that we all like biologists think is like what's your goal, right? Going back to like it depends on what your main goal for that stream bank is. If it's erosion control and you want to really like make that stream bank solid quickly, it's your fast growing species like dogwoods and willows, which can be like live staked. um, we do have riparian planting guidelines, which can be found on our website that give you a list of appropriate species for that kind of riparian, like semi-wet environment. Um, we do like you want to consider like if you have beaver in the area that are going to come in and eat your trees like instantly. Sometimes that's what you want, right? You want to provide that food source. There have been instances where there's a lot of um, deer browse can also impact it. That's pretty hard to handle, uh, but you try to plant as many as you can and hope that you can like outcompete uh, any of the browse.
I saw the tree tubes in the photo and I didn't know if those were successful or not. I've heard mixed reviews.
I think like as long as you go back and remove them, they can be successful. Um, yeah, I think we there have been instances where like people will put like beaver exclusion cages around trees, but then forget about them and they end up girdling the trees as they grow. So uh,
And so I could keep asking questions, but um one that I, as a conservation district, we often get called after floods and, oh, there's this tree, I'm going to remove it. And we try to talk through, the benefits in certain places and drawbacks to trees being there for others. But I really like the way you talked about that and the infrastructure piece. Um, is that something that when flooding happens, you also get those same calls? Yeah.
yeah, yes, especially I think like doing the type of work that we're doing and having I think more of like the fish background. Um, like it can be painful to see like wood being like pulled out of the stream. But we also like fully acknowledge like why that is the first like gut reaction, and that there's instances where that has to occur. um and I think really it's like where can we have those conversations like early and often so that when these situations arise we're not being reactionary. We've kind of already like put it out there and other people are taking up that message on the ground. um yeah, but it's definitely difficult.
And I've seen it be very successful. I was actually with Marie Cadito, our watershed planner in this region, and we were on a visit where someone was about to remove this tree like in the next few days, and she was able to explain this whole thing. And they were like, okay, like I understand it, and they didn't want to remove it after. So obviously want to do it before the couple days before, but
Yeah.
okay, so Bay has a question. I'm curious if you do any public outreach or educational events on the importance of riparian buffers or strategic wood additions, and if so, what's the format for this? Anything in addition to webinars?
Pretty much webinars. So we really rely on partners to help us like bring the information to people. We have information on our website. Sometimes we'll do like social media posts. We've done a lot of social media posts about strategic wood addition, especially once we hit that like 10-year mark, to highlight that. We do like press releases. We'll do Wildlife Watch. We do a lot of that with WCAX, and that's not always like habitat based, but it's always like a message we're trying to like really get across. We Judd Kratzer up in the Northeast Kingdom. He's the fisheries biologist out of the St. Johnsbury office. He's done a lot of like articles. He's actually been invited out to Canada, out west to Maine, to talk to other fisheries professionals about this management technique. And then a lot of times it's like Trout Unlimited, the conservation districts, uh, yeah, regional planning commissions, those sorts of things. There's a lot of overlap in the work we do, but also like me as a fisheries biologist with the state, like we rely so heavily on partners to be the boots on the ground, to be having those conversations with landowners, because it's hard for us to reach a wide audience sometimes.
Yeah, I've also seen at wildlife festivals a few, um, but
Yes.
obviously you get different. You're not always talking about this. People come up to talk about anything, so it's not targeted at uh, this sort of riparian benefits.
Yes, if you
Um,
guys aren't aware or haven't been to the Herrick's Cove Wildlife Festival that happens the first weekend in May, I highly recommend. I'll be there with all of my wood is good, fish grow on trees information. Um, and yeah, it's a great way to also find people that are doing this type of work in the region.
yeah, yeah. Christina put it's the same time as Green Up
Yeah,
Day. Yeah, it's we also are there. It's the day after our annual plant sale, so it's a fun weekend.
busy
Um,
weekend.
yeah. So we got a question about how you work with the Department of Transportation. Can you speak to more about how you work with that department to improve habitat for fish? I've heard some rumblings about the wildlife crossings recently, but I don't think there was much about aquatic habitat.
Yeah, we actually work. So I think I gave you like the Venn diagram. Um, I also say like, and what we're really bad at doing, I think, as fisheries biologists is selling ourselves or like letting people know just like how many things we work on and do. So not only are we working on land acquisitions and I work on state lands with a stewardship team to manage all of those, and I cover the streams portion of that. But we also do like Act 250 and Section 248 permit reviews, and that's specifically focused on streams and stream banks, riparian areas. So we're getting riparian protections there. And then we're also working with DEC and the river management engineers. We have an agreement with the rivers um, program, uh, who are the ones in direct contact with VTrans, in direct contact with local municipalities that are doing culvert repairs, culvert replacements, uh, bridge repairs, those sorts of things. And the fisheries biologists get notified when those projects are coming across. We review them and we will provide comments directly to the river management engineer about what the fish population looks like in the area, just our local knowledge and concerns if it's something that like we've had our eye on for a long time, or we want to get better uh, outcomes for AOP, that aquatic organism transport passage. And we have done that now for so long. That started after Irene. and I think the conversations that we've had about like the benefits of providing aquatic organism passage at these crossings also like benefits the infrastructure, that we aren't having to fight as hard to get aquatic organism passage. Now we have um, an agreement that they cannot make passage worse. If they're replacing a structure, it has to go in as is or at the level it was or better. Vermont is also pretty unique in we have done so much of that like habitat work and the like cross pollination of all the different entities that are working on these projects, so well that we're the only state where FEMA will actually come in and replace a structure with something better. So they're usually like uh, operating. I guess their typical reaction is to put in what was there already, but because of the work that both Vermont DEC, VTrans, and Vermont Fish and Wildlife, having all worked together, have kind of like set that bar where, like, no, we need to provide something that's larger and gonna have more resilience and better restoration, which is pretty exciting.
That's really cool. And especially after a flood response when everyone's like rushing to do everything, it's good to know that that is something that is like held to a high standard.
Yeah, and you mentioned the wildlife highways, and I think I saw that article came out recently. We Vermont Fish and Wildlife puts on, I think, with VTrans a I can't what I can't remember what it's called, but wildlife and highways or highways and habitats, I think, um, training. And on the fishery side of things, we work with the Rivers program and do rivers and roads trainings. There's two of those a year, and we've started rotating them around the state to try to make sure that like anyone who wants to go doesn't have to travel like 2 hours because it's a 2 day training that has both a field component, presentation component, and component of working in the stream tables to try to take the information that you've learned about how water moves in a system and the importance of wood to repair something in the stream table, which is always a lot of fun. I really enjoy those trainings.
Going to one of their ones in October, not October, geez, in March,
Oh
and
yeah,
they're always great.
yeah,
And I think the other cool thing about them is the diversity of people that go to the trainings in terms of you get municipal, you get engineers, you get conservation districts, so you get people talking about problems that we're seeing on the ground, and it's from all different angles,
yeah,
which is
absolutely.
great solutions come up when we talk about those. We have another question. So, Janie says, I live in the Bennington Conservation District, and our town's river, the Hoosick, is severely polluted due to the infamous tannery that operated upstream back in the day. Do we want to foster higher populations of fish there if there's mercury and other toxins in the water here?
Yes. Short answer, yes. I think DEC does have some like fish consumption advisories. Um, but I don't see why we wouldn't want to enhance or protect fisheries in our streams. Um, I know a lot of people still eat fish. What we've seen is a shift in angler attitudes and behaviors towards catch and release. So if you're thinking about it from like an angling opportunity perspective, then uh, you wouldn't be concerned about that. But um, yeah,
For questions, these have been great. I hadn't heard of the Vermont roads and wildlife. I've heard about like the articles and stuff, but hadn't heard about that program specifically, so that's really cool.
And Bennington County. So I also cover the bat and kill. So I don't cover the Hoosick or the Balloonsack, but I do cover the bat and kill as well.
It's an interesting map of uh locations.
Yes. Yes. I think when they were breaking it up, the biologist didn't want to give up the bat and kill. So there's this small section of Bennington that is part of District 2 in the Rutland District. Um, but yeah, I cover from Heartland to the Massachusetts border.
I had a question about uh electrofishing studies and when you do those. How frequently are those done, and how do you decide where? It sounds very complicated.
Yes, there's always more areas we want to sample than we have time to do. Our work is very seasonal. Typically, it starts with our field season starts with trout stocking in May, and then it's pretty like full out until October. We do elect electrofishing surveys on lakes and ponds. I typically do that at night, the first like week of June. So that's typically for like bass and panfish species. We do those at night because that's when fish are feeding and coming up into the shallow areas, which makes them easier for us to collect. We do our trout sampling end of July through the end of September. So we have in-stream work dates that are aimed to protect spawning populations so that we're not disturbing them or we're not walking through the stream as much. That typically start end October 1. So that's when trout are beginning to spawn and they're moving out of the areas that we would anticipate being able to find them with our electrofishing equipment. So we typically are, yeah, we end the end of September. Um, that's to say that's like our in the southeastern part are my colleagues on Champlain and other areas of the state have different projects they might be focusing on, and their work can be like through December or even like early March. I have a coworker who's starting trap netting for pike, I think, in the next month or so.
That I guess that's not dependent on snow, or I guess if you're on a lake, you don't have to worry about the snow ice over.
Yeah.
Unless there are
Uh,
other. Oh,
we
good.
also do a lot of angler surveys. So uh, that's the people part of the Venn diagram is uh, where are people fishing? What are they fishing for? How successful they are at catching. That goes into like our stocking rates or what wild populations are doing. Um, and any sort of like new management or changes in management, we typically will do angler surveys to see how that might impact people on the ground. And that happens during ice fishing season as well.
Is that roll into when the fishing derby, or people are too busy to take a survey during the fishing derby? I don't know.
No, we do that. I typically don't go to that because they're usually really far north. To have enough ice to know in advance to plan like our free fishing days, they're typically farther north than our southern lakes and ponds. Um, so I don't tend to help out with those, but we have been doing a creel survey on the Nap ponds this winter. Um, we're testing out a lot of those waters were closed to fishing in the winter. Then a few years ago, we simplified some of our regulations and saw that as an opportunity to allow people, if they wanted to, go out and fish on the nap ponds in the winter, um, that they could, and saw that they were still catching fish in the winter that were stocked in May, when we previously thought that um, people wouldn't be catching fish, or it'd be very rare. So because of the popularity of those ponds, the way that they're managed, they have really low diversity. They were built specifically to provide fishing opportunity. Um, and now that it's open in the winter, we took a small portion of the trout that we stock um, in May and stocked them early. So we call them advanced yearlings. They're about 1.5 versus like the 2 year olds, the trophy trout that go in. Um, and we've been out there sampling and talking to anglers, seeing if people have heard about that opportunity, if they're taking advantage of being able to go out and doing that, and if they're catching the fish that we put in. And that's been really successful so far.
I'll start my fun little closing thing. I also have some things I'll put in the chat. Um, a feedback link for this webinar. I'll also send this an email, but whatever's easiest for you. And then a couple things I wanted to plug from the Conservation District side. We have our annual plant sale, which I touched on. So if you want to do both the Harrods Cove Wildlife Festival and the plant sale, join us on a really fun weekend, the first weekend in May. Um, we're also having a photography contest for our 2027 calendar. So if you take pictures of wildlife, please submit them. We already have some really great ones. But I encourage all the submissions. Anyone can submit up to three. And I also just wanted to thank you all for coming and Courtney for speaking. I learned so much and is so fascinating to me. Um, You guys really have a great way of framing all of this work in a way that's accessible and like interesting, and I think it's such great work that you do. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. No, this was a lot of fun. Anytime I get to just like share all the things that we work on, and the things that I'm excited about. I'm happy to, any different topics you guys are interested in covering, I'm happy to come back.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure we'll find there's so many things to talk about with the fisheries department that I'm sure
Yeah.
we can find another topic. And I'll invite you all to it again. But thank you so much. I'll send out a follow-up with this recording. We had a bunch of people register that said they could not make it, so they're looking forward to the recording. And if you missed anything, you can play it back. But thank you and have a great night. Bye.
Bye.